The strangest thing about betrayal isn't the lie. It's the moment you realize the person lying to you has already convinced themselves they're telling the truth. I learned that lesson at Gate C-17 in Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, standing less than 20 feet away from the man I'd spent 12 years loving. He stared at me as if he'd seen a ghost. His mouth hung open. His boarding pass slipped from his hand, and for the first time since we'd met, my husband looked genuinely afraid. Not angry, not embarrassed. Afraid, because the wife he thought he'd left behind was walking through the first class boarding lane while he stood, trapped in the economy line, surrounded by strangers watching his every reaction. He whispered only one word. How? At that moment, he still didn't know the truth. He didn't know his biggest secret had already found its way to me, and he certainly didn't know that. The flight we were both about to board wasn't just headed to New York. It was carrying us straight into the end of our marriage. There are stories that begin with shouting. Mine began with silence. The dangerous kind. The kind that settles into a home so slowly you mistake it for peace. If you've ever ignored your instincts, because loving someone felt easier than questioning them, then you'll understand exactly why I stayed as long as I did. Sometimes the loudest warning signs are the quietest moments. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Stories travel farther than people ever do, and it's always fascinating to see how many lives connect through a single experience. If stories that explore trust, resilience, and unexpected turns speak to you, consider joining this journey with us. Now, let me tell you about the day everything finally made sense. My name is Naomi Carter. I was 38 years old. I taught architectural history at Georgia State University, collected antique fountain pens, and believed airports smelled like possibility. My husband, Brandon Carter, was 41, successful, charming, the kind of man who remembered birthdays without reminders and could convince anyone he was exactly who they needed him to be. People adored Brandon. Neighbors, co-workers, restaurant servers. Even my students liked him whenever he came to campus events. He had a gift for making people feel seen. Looking back, I wonder if that was because he spent his entire life studying people the way chess players study boards. He always knew the next move before anyone else. We met 13 years earlier in a downtown Atlanta bookstore. I reached for the last copy of The Warmth of Other Suns at exactly the same moment he did. He smiled. You take it. You saw it first. So, I can order another one. You sure? I'd rather remember meeting someone interesting than winning an argument over a book. It was such an ordinary sentence, but it changed everything. We talked for 2 hours in the bookstore cafe. 3 months later, we were dating. 2 years after that, we were married beneath an old oak tree outside Savannah. For a long time, life felt beautifully predictable. Saturday farmers markets, Sunday dinners with my parents, movie nights where Brandon always fell asleep before the ending. Tiny rituals became our language. He made coffee every morning. I packed his lunch every afternoon. He always kissed my forehead before leaving for work. I always waited by the window when he pulled into the driveway. Nothing dramatic, just life, or at least the version of life I believed was real. The first crack appeared 5 years before the airport. It was so small I almost laughed at myself for noticing it. Brandon had never cared about expensive clothes. Then suddenly, Italian shoes, tailored suits, designer watches. When I complimented him, he'd grin. Promotion means expectations. Fair enough. Then came the gym membership. New cologne, late meetings, business dinners, weekend conferences. None of those things alone meant anything. Together, they painted a picture I didn't want to examine. Whenever I asked how work was going, he'd answer with facts instead of stories. I had meetings. We closed a contract. Long day. That was unusual. Brandon loved telling stories. Yet somehow, his workdays had become strangely forgettable. One evening while folding laundry, I found a hotel keycard in his jacket pocket. Chicago, except his conference had supposedly been in Charlotte. When I held it up, he laughed immediately. Oh, that's embarrassing. What? I grabbed someone else's jacket at the conference lounge. So why is it in yours? I must have switched them back without noticing. He smiled, kissed my forehead, made dinner. By bedtime, I felt foolish for asking. That's how manipulation often works. Not with arguments, with confidence. He never acted defensive. He acted amused, as though reality itself had misunderstood him. My best friend Evelyn wasn't fooled. She noticed changes long before I admitted them. You look tired. I'm grading papers. No. She stirred sugar into her coffee. You're carrying someone else's emotional weight. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. I trust my husband. She nodded gently. I know. Then why are we talking about this? Because trusting someone isn't the same thing as refusing to see them. Those words irritated me, mostly because they lingered. For weeks, Brandon started traveling almost twice every month. New York, Dallas, Seattle, Boston. Always work, always urgent, always impossible for spouses to attend. Then one evening he announced something unusual. Our company is sending executive teams to Manhattan next month. That's wonderful. I'll only be gone 4 days. I'll miss you. I know. He hugged me tightly. Longer than usual. You deserve a vacation too. My heart stopped. Cancelled what? Before I could hear more, the floor creaked beneath me. His chair moved. I stepped away just as his office door opened. Oh, he smiled. You're home early. I forgot my notes. Lucky timing. He kissed me, as if nothing had happened. I almost asked. Instead, I waited. Sometimes answers reveal themselves faster than accusations. The answer came exactly 6 days before the flight. It arrived inside an ordinary white envelope. No return address. No name, just my address written in careful block letters. Inside was one photograph. Brandon, standing outside an upscale Manhattan hotel, holding hands with a woman I'd never seen before. The picture wasn't intimate enough to prove an affair, but it wasn't innocent either. On the back, someone had written only one sentence. Ask him why your ticket disappeared. I stared at those words for almost an hour. My ticket? What ticket? I checked my email. Nothing. Then I searched deleted messages. Nothing. Finally, I logged into our shared airline rewards account. There it was. A reservation history. 2 tickets had originally been booked. One had been canceled. Mine. My hands began shaking. The cancellation timestamp matched. 3 days earlier. The same evening, Brandon had stayed late at work. He hadn't simply forgotten to invite me. He had booked my ticket, then secretly canceled it, and never said a word. That night, I lay beside him while he slept peacefully. For 12 years, I'd believed I knew the rhythm of his breathing. Now it sounded like a stranger's. I turned toward the ceiling. One question echoed through my mind over and over. If he was willing to erase me from that trip, what exactly was waiting for him in New York? And more importantly, who had sent me that photograph? I decided I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Because for the first time since we'd met, I realized the truth wasn't something I needed to demand. It was something I needed to witness with my own eyes. And before the week was over, an unexpected phone call would give me the chance to do exactly that. The next morning, while Brandon showered upstairs, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Instead, I answered, Naomi? The voice belonged to an older woman. Calm, measured. I don't have much time. If you want answers about your husband, don't confront him. My pulse quickened. Who is this? I'll explain later. Just promise me one thing. Silence. Get on that flight. The line went dead. Most people think courage feels powerful. It doesn't. Courage feels like your hands, trembling while you do the thing you're terrified to do. I spent that afternoon calling the airline. The agent confirmed that my original reservation had indeed been canceled from Brandon's online account. Fortunately, several first-class seats were still available. Using years of accumulated travel points from conferences and university research grants, I booked one without touching our joint account. I told no one, not even Evelyn. For the first time in 12 years, I had a secret of my own. The morning of departure arrived. Brandon kissed my forehead. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too. He smiled naturally. Not a hint of guilt crossed his face. Watching him lie so effortlessly hurt more than the lie itself. He left for the airport. I waited 20 minutes before calling a rideshare. Atlanta's airport buzzed with the familiar rhythm of rolling luggage, overhead announcements, and hurried footsteps. I kept my distance. Brandon never noticed me. He checked his bag, grabbed coffee, answered a phone call, then walked toward economy boarding. Exactly as planned. I took a deep breath and approached the first-class entrance. The gate agent smiled. Good morning, Ms. Carter. I handed over my passport. Then I heard it. Naomi? His voice cracked. I turned slowly. Brandon looked as though every explanation he'd rehearsed had vanished. His face had gone completely pale. You... His eyes dropped to my boarding pass. How are you here? I tilted my head. You canceled my ticket. Around us, conversation stopped. Several passengers looked over. I can explain. I'm sure you can. But not here. The gate agent politely interrupted. Ma'am, we're ready to board. I smiled. Thank you. Without another word, I walked into the jet bridge. For the first time in years, I walked away from my husband instead of following him. First class was quiet. Warm towels, fresh coffee, soft instrumental music. Yet I couldn't enjoy any of it. My thoughts raced. What exactly had Brandon planned? Who was waiting in New York? Half an hour after takeoff, I saw him walking toward the front of the aircraft. He stopped beside my seat. Can we talk? The flight attendant gently stepped between us. Sir, please return to your assigned seat. It's important. So is following federal regulations. A few passengers chuckled softly. Brandon looked embarrassed. He returned to economy. For the next 2 hours, I stared out the window. Clouds had never looked so lonely. When we landed at JFK, I stayed seated until most passengers had left. I knew Brandon would be waiting. Sure enough, he stood near baggage claim. His expression had changed. Less shocked. More desperate. Please. He stepped closer. I can explain everything. Then explain. He swallowed. I wasn't cheating. You booked one hotel room. I know how that looks. You canceled my ticket. I panicked. Why? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because the truth has one weakness. It doesn't cooperate with lies. Before either of us could continue, a voice interrupted. Brandon? A woman walked toward us. She wore a navy business suit and carried a leather briefcase. She looked equally surprised to see me. I thought she wasn't coming. The words escaped before she could stop herself. Brandon closed his eyes. For one brief moment, everything became clear. My name is Claire. She turned toward me. I'm sorry. Brandon interrupted. Claire, don't. No. She shook her head. I'm done protecting you. She looked directly into my eyes. We've been seeing each other for almost a year. The airport seemed to disappear. People walked around us. Announcements echoed overhead. But all I could hear was the sound of 12 years breaking apart. I wanted to leave months ago, Claire continued. But every time I tried, he said he'd tell you. I frowned. What? He told me your marriage was already over. Brandon whispered. Please stop. Claire ignored him. He said you were emotionally unstable, that you depended on him, and he didn't know how to leave without hurting you. I stared at him. The man I'd defended to everyone, the man I'd trusted without question. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Then another voice joined us. Mrs. Carter? An older woman approached. Silver hair, kind eyes. I recognized her voice instantly. The phone call. I'm Helen. She sighed. I'm Claire's mother. Brandon looked horrified. You? She nodded. I discovered everything months ago. She turned to me. My husband destroyed our family the same way Brandon nearly destroyed yours. I couldn't watch another woman spend years living inside a lie. So, I whispered, the photograph? I sent it. The phone call? That was me too. She smiled sadly. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. Brandon finally spoke. I made mistakes. Mistakes? I asked quietly. No. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. You built another life while pretending ours still existed. He reached for my hand. I stepped back. I loved you. I believe you. He looked hopeful. Then I finished. But love without honesty becomes manipulation. The divorce wasn't easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is. There were lawyers. Long conversations. Tears I thought would never stop. But there was also something unexpected. Peace. Months later, I returned to teaching with renewed purpose. I introduced a new lecture to my students about architecture and foundations. Buildings don't collapse because of one dramatic moment. They collapse because small cracks are ignored for too long. People aren't very different. Claire eventually apologized again. Not because it changed the past, but because accountability matters. Helen and I stayed in touch. Sometimes the people who help us heal are complete strangers. A year later, I flew back to New York for an academic conference. This time I traveled alone. Not lonely, alone. There's a difference. As boarding began, the gate agent smiled. Welcome aboard, Professor Carter. I smiled back. For the first time in years, that last name belonged only to me. Not because of marriage, but because I had chosen to keep it until I was ready to change it. Healing isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's simply walking forward without looking back. If this story leaves you with one lesson, let it be this. Trust is one of the most beautiful gifts we can give another person, but it should never require us to ignore what we see, hear, or feel. Love grows through honesty, not secrecy, and real strength isn't found in holding on at any cost. Sometimes it's found in having the courage to leave when the truth finally reveals itself. If this story made you think differently about trust, intuition, or second chances, I'd love to hear your thoughts.